2022 제주
2020 Jeju Plus International Environment Forum is now offered the final session. In this sixth session, we're going to talk about the global best practices in solving plastic pollution and biodiversity conservation. We are broadcasting live time on YouTube and will receive the question through YouTube chat box. Please leave your question until 20 minutes before the end of the session, and we will collect them and deliver it to the presenters. I will introduce the moderator, Director Chun Deo of Asia Climate Change Education Center. Please welcome with a big round of applause. Distinguished guest, this is very final session, and I'm the moderator for this final session, Director Chung Dae-yeon of Asia Climate Change Education Center. To begin with, on behalf of the steering committee, I'd like to express my gratitude for your kind participation to the forum, and also I wholeheartedly welcome all of you. I believe that the MC already introduced the topic of the session, global best practices in solving plastic pollution and biodiversity conservation. So we are going to listen to the major activities of the main players of the biodiversity conservation and plastic pollution resolution. So we will listen to a set of presentation first, and then we will have a panel discussion. So we have two sub-parts for this session. And let me introduce how it will be proceeded first. We have, in Korean time, it is 4:20, so up until 6 o'clock, we have 1 hour 40 minutes for this session. We have 4 presenters. Actually, there was 4 presenters, but one presenter changed to the discussant. So we have 4 presenters for the first part. And after listening to the 4 presentation, we will move on to second. I will give 15 minutes to each presenter. Please keep your time precisely so that we can ensure the ample time for the panel discussion. But as you know, not just this session, but in other workshops or other conferences, time delay happens consecutively, and that means that the very last presenters would not have much time or just have no time to make anything. So please keep your time 15 minutes to give ample time to each presenter. If you exceed that timeline, you will kind of make the last presenter skip some part of his or her presentation. So we are doing kind of hybrid forum, both on and offline. And we are providing simultaneous interpretation to use both language in Korean and English. So the steering committee asked me to proceed this session in Korean because most of the participants are Korean. And if necessary, I might speak in English as well, but it will be translated as well. So I think I'd like to give the floor to the first presenter, Mr. Im Hyung-mook, CEO of Gingiwa Badang. Mr. Im Hyung-mook is, like I said, the CEO of Gingiwa Badang, and also especially he's specialized in making video for the education of marine litter activities, and also in KBS channel, he documented and filmed the Soul and Ocean documentary. So he has in-depth expertise in this field, and he's going to talk about the biodiversity in the intertidal zone of Jeju and marine pollution. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. As have been introduced, I am Im Hyung-mook. I have produced films and documentaries regarding maritime living organisms. First of all, I'd like to sincerely thank the organizer for inviting me today, and my special thanks go to all the participants for your presence. The name of the company is Gingyue Badang. So for those who do not know of us, so Gingi means crab and Badang means sea. So our company's name is Crab and the Sea. So when it comes to Jeju's sea, people think about coral communities and in the Pacific bottlenose dolphin and women diver, so-called haenyeo. But what we need to focus on, and what I'm focusing on, is that something underwater and living organisms underwater that we have not paid enough attention. So in the intertidal zone, there are many living organisms, and intertidal zone refers an area where the ocean meets the land between high and low tides. And also, I produce TV shows and documentaries regarding it. So this is released by Ministry of Fisheries and Oceans based on Dr. Kim's research. So it shows biodiversity of large benthic invertebrates. It means living organisms crawling in the floor of the sea. And globally, we have a very unique biodiversity when it comes to large benthic invertebrates. So considering the size of the ocean, we can say that our aquatic biodiversity is quite various and unique. And indeed, Jeju Island has very unique seas with great biodiversity. And the picture was shown several times before. So aquatic biodiversity is very unique in Jeju Island because of sea currents near the island. So cold currents and warm currents, and if those two currents meet, then that area has a unique biodiversity. And Jeju is located in a position where warm currents and cold currents meet. So let's look at the geology of Jeju Island. If you go to shore areas of Jeju, you can see many rocky intertidal zones rather than some pearls. So we used to talk about biodiversity, but mudflat is 2D area, but Jeju's rocky intertidal zones provide a lot of locations and spaces for living creatures, living organisms. But mudflat does not provide a proper environment where some living creatures, living organisms who lives by attaching to some rocky materials. So I especially focus on some ponds in the ocean. It is called ocean pond. So no matter how living organisms are accustomed to these rocky areas, but aquatic living organisms basically need water and sea. So, and Jeju's aquatic environment has a lot of ponds in the ocean, which makes biodiversity in this area very unique. And I believe, I dare to say, biodiversity is the most dense in this area, I guess. So many presentations have been delivered regarding plastics. And I know and I heard marine plastics, and I thought, should I change my focus to marine plastics? So of course, marine plastics have affected us and affected living organisms, and it has affected the ecosystem, but we need to know how. We need to know what it was in the past, because without knowing the control group, we will have no idea regarding the future. So that's why I have observed, and I decided to record the current landscape of the sea. So to take a shoot or to take a film, I go into a pond and shoot a film, and I'm going to do my job going forward as well. So there's a film I created and produced. So please move forward. So this is how great biodiversity is in Jeju Island. But there are many threats imposing to intertidal zones of Jeju, and there are many reasons behind it. And one of them is chlorosis and some nitrogen coming from fertilizers. And because of that, some living organisms are on the rise. So if the number of green algae is increasing, then this endangered species crab is increasing. And also, sewage is leaking and entering into the oceans. Indeed, this sewage pipe from this building released a lot of sewage to the ocean, and I filmed it. And indeed, we are looking this beautiful scenery, but under your feet, on your feet, you can find a lot of plastic waste. So this is why I started a campaign called Let's Get It Done, or Let's Clean Up the Sea. It is not a campaign where a lot of organizations work together. It is a campaign of individuals cleaning up the sea individually. So the campaign has not yet actively promoted, but so many people are uploading photos of them cleaning up the sea on their social media. And last but not least, I'd like to make some proposals. And I supervised some cleaning employees, and there are some cleaning employees and cleaners who were hired by the provincial government, and there are some volunteers. But indeed, outsourcing cleaners and cleaning employees is not hard to do, but it requires some qualification. So that's why villagers clean up their villages and shores so that they could make some money, and that would be a good idea. So I'd like to make a proposal to create a scheme where incentives could be given to villagers for cleaning up their villages. So usually many people clean up just branches and leaves, but what is really need to be cleaned up is plastics and other waste. So if those plastic waste and waste are cleaned up, then it will create much better benefits and impacts. So I'd like to make a proposal that villages and villagers be part of such employees of cleaners. Thank you very much for your presentation. You are on time.
So, as you just heard, let me summarize the presentation. So, intertidal zone on the Jeju Island boasts biodiversities, and that biodiversity was introduced with a video clip by the presenter, and also the reason and the cause of the pollution of Jeju Island was explained, and lastly, he talked about what kind of activities should be unfolded to preserve the biodiversity. It should more than just the collection of the waste from coastal areas. So companies need to work together to clean up the coastal areas, he said in his presentation. So that was the summary of the first presentation. Thank you. And let me move on to the second presentation, which will be given by Dr. Hong Yun-hee. Dr. Hong Yun-hee is the Executive Director of WWF Korea branch, and also in the past she served as the visiting professor of the National Ulsan Science and Technology Research Institute. And she's going to talk about the no plastic in nature, how to resolve the plastic issues, and the activities of WWF. So the floor is yours. Greetings. And I'd like to emphasize the title of my speech once again, no plastic in nature. So I'm not saying that we should not use any plastic, no plastic specifically in nature, no leakage. So why WWF commenced its activity? Actually, we first focused on the preservation of the nature and biodiversity as well. So that nature conservation was the main mission of my institution, but we started to pay interest to climate change and plastics as well. And why that kind of transition was made, that kind of connection will be explained in my presentation as well. WWF was established in Swiss Gland in 1961, and the global headquarters of WWF thus is located in Gland, and there are 6 million donors in 100 countries who are working with us. And in 2014, the Korean branch was established. We pursue cooperative, innovative, scientific-based approach for biodiversity preservation and reduction of the human footprint. So this can be summarized that we are pursuing sustainability. Sustainability means the coexistence between nature and human beings, and to preserve that nature, biodiversity must be preserved, and thus the climate and pollution issues, plastic is also part of such a pollution, should be resolved as well. So that's why we started to pay interest to plastic issues and climate issues as well. You must have seen this page for multiple times, so I'd like to say just one thing: huge exponential increase. So if something increases exponentially like this, whether it is plastic or not, the problem can be originated from the source of production. As the previous presenter said, plastic extraction and production and consumption, all those phases come one after another. And I believe that the greenhouse gas emission only happens 5% at the first phase and 10% in the second phase. And we already know that petrochemical resources are not sustainable raw materials anymore. So taking those factors into consideration, we need to do something about plastic that is clear, that is telltale truth if you see this slide. So we use that much, and the pollutants are not just within the land as it was introduced, they are all over the place into the oceans as well. And for multiple reasons, like for example, the current has become a global issue, so that's why the plastic issue is not a regional issue but a global issue that should be tackled by the global society. Already, researchers all around the world found out the interaction between plastic and nature, and we are eating or drinking microplastics through multiple channels. We already know that there are microplastics. Also, WWF report create a kind of high resonance that we are eating at least a plastic amounts to one plastic card. So we eat that a lot, and that will cause problem to our body, but that does not mean that the toxicity will kind of realized in a minute, because toxicity differs in depending on what kind of living organism eat that plastics. However, that random ingestion of the plastics will cause the health of human beings in the end. We kind of can guess it, but even the bigger problem is that we don't know what should be the priority, and that priority should be set through the researches, for example, the research that has been done by the previous speakers in the previous session, which is ongoing. So We need to resolve the plastic issue with the multi-stakeholder cooperation, and WWF believed that the international society and countries, municipalities, companies, regional communities, and individuals need to take up responsibilities to the fullest to resolve the plastic issue. And what was emphasized by my institution was that we need to have a harmonized, legally binding plastic convention, and that should be signed and ratified by companies. So this is kind of same concept that we apply to the climate change issue. If there is a global issue, to resolve this kind of global issue, we need the effort more than the national level. So we need to set a global target and do the monitoring and hold someone responsible if something wrong happens. And at the same time, standards and norms should be harmonized so that we can clearly set the targets. So this is the concept we are already familiar with and applied it to the climate change battle. So that's why we did a lot of work for the plastic pollution. And in order to make it happen, plastic reduction should happen at the national level, and at the same time, resource circulation must be realized. So we emphasize that global treaty or convention must be made, and reduction has to be made as well. But so far, for the sake of convenience, human beings have been using much plastic, so we need to kind of take up the inconvenience to reduce the plastics, because we cannot just phase out the plastic overnight. So in order to minimize the leakage and in order to not to waste our limited resources, because we are limiting we are wasting resources. So this not just harm the environment or harm our body, but we are simply wasting our precious resources. So circular resource management is needed at the national level, municipality level, company level, and at individual level. That kind of basic understanding must be there before joining this effort. So economic feasibility must be guaranteed at the same time. This means human beings is an economic animal. A moral motive cannot change the behavior of human beings. If it can change there should be certain limitation. So economic incentive must be included as well, as we emphasize in our initiative. The key part of no plastic in nature is like this, as you can see on this slide. Everything has been covered, so I will skip some redundant part. EPR system, extended producer responsibility, has been said multiple times in the previous sessions. International cooperation must be there for the improvement of EPR system as well. And this year, that treaty decided to be formed by parties. So for the next 2 years, the details of it will be fleshed out. So the treaty will be made, and the Korean government is actively engaging in the drafting of the treaty, which is kind of welcoming news. But what matters the most in this process is companies and consumers, because the products are made by companies for the sake of profit, and consumers pay the price for the sake of the convenience. So we need to change this paradigm to reduce the production of plastics and move towards the circular economy. So instead of just thinking about the money, we need to think about the value of ESG as well, to apply the holistic approach to the nature conservation and the resource usage. WWF also engaged in other activities as well. As we said in the previous presentation, riding on the front, all the plastics from the East Asian region comes all the way to Korea. But we cannot just criticize East Asian countries. So through international treaty, we need to work with them for the sake of them and for the sake of us as well. Also, WWF as an NGO can also engage in the work with high conflicting areas and build infrastructure in those countries. And we can select a few cities first and have supported to build proper infrastructure or the management system to tackle the plastic issues. So we are providing such a support to build the so-called plastic smart society. So if that's the case, what we're doing in Korea, let me share some of them. The Korean government already engaged in the global treaty formation, like I said, and also the Korean government already need to take up responsibility as an economic powerhouse. So we cannot just evade our responsibility just because we want. So the government and the researchers has been struggling to find out how to make a contribution to the global society and go to the right direction. And also in Korea, we have very large number of well-established companies. So WWF decided to work with the private sector first. Of course, we are engaging in other effort as well, but we decided to, for example, we produced the guideline for private sectors and held round-table discussion with private and public centers to create a venue where we can discuss the plastic issues. And also, we gathered like-minded companies to make a declaration on plastic reduction. So such cooperation has been kind of facilitated. And on top of that, we asked them to monitor their activities yearly and produce an annual report on their plastic reduction activities. Of course, public education is also done as well. And not just on the Jeju Island, but we visit other areas to collect waste directly as well. But to tell the truth, those discarded plastic must be collected, of course. However, the source of the production must be curbed. And that is more important, I believe. That's why we are doing this kind of many activities. If you visit our official website, you will be able to access to multiple activities that has been done by my institution. But I'd like to focus on this page for some more because WWF believes that this is an essence. We believe that the Earth is a single planet for everyone. We have only one planet, and we are using excessive amount of resources that exceeds the capacity of the planet. Overconsumption, overproduction leads to excessive pollution, destruction of nature, and invisible issues that destroy the nature. In order to resolve these kind of issues, financial flow must be reversed as well, and the nature assets must be preserved, and the smarter consumption must be promoted as well. That's why we are giving education to consumers and companies. And another thing I'd like to emphasize that this kind of nature assets, actually some regions spend natural assets and some regions produce natural assets. So there is an imbalance between the country that use it and the company who don't use it. So this kind of unfairness must be fixed as well so that we can manage the nature in a kind of balanced and fair manner on the global stage. That kind of global level fairness is taken into consideration. Our ultimate target is the preservation of intact nature and preservation of biodiversity to give benefit to human beings, which means that human beings can eat and use energy without worries and do about their daily lives, and plastic should be also one of it. This is related to the climate change issue, biodiversity issues, and all those issues must be taken into consideration at the same time. We cannot just tackle one by one. Plastic reduction, greenhouse gas reduction, or biodiversity conservation, those are not the separate concept. That kind of silo approach is not the answer. We need to put everything into one basket under the understanding that we have only one Earth. And we already know very well that we need to propose a proper direction, but at the same time, the government and companies, NGOs need to play more critical role in all these changes together possible. These will be only possible if we are together. So we are kind of giving a chance to put the forces together. I hope that we can work together. Thank you very much for your kind of listening.
Thank you very much for delivering the presentation in such short time. So let me briefly summarize what she said. She talked about the activities carried out by the WWF, and also she covered plastic production and production predicted by 2036 and 2050. So huge times of production would be done. So also she talked about the current status of pollution, and also she addressed WWF's plastic studies and research and the average volume and amount of plastics eaten by us. So overall, there were 3 proposals. First is that we need to think about how to address and tackle plastic pollution issues. It requires multilateral cooperation system. That is the first proposal. So such multilateral cooperation system, from the perspective of world, it would be cooperation between governments, and domestically it would be cooperation between businesses or central government and local government or individuals. So such cooperation would be available. And second is no plastic in nature basic strategy. So we need to create a circular economy for no plastic era. And when it comes to technology and methods, she talked about the EPR, and to that end, the government has a role to play. And also she talked about WWF Korea's activities. And one of the core activities is this. Many things we need to create as we need, and we need to consume as we need. But we are currently overproduce and overconsume. So our culture is a bit far away from protecting the environment. So we need to shift and we need to transform our society's structure and system. I guess that is the summary of her presentation. Thank you. And third speaker is Kim Hyun-jung, Secretary General of Gyeonggi Federation for Environmental Movements. And she's working as a lecturer for environmental education, and also she wrote a book titled To Achieve Carbon Neutrality and the trend of environmental education in Korea. So the theme of her presentation is a case of resource circulation village laboratory, which is located in Seongnam. So she's going to talk about Seongnam Resource Circulation Store RE100. Please go ahead. Good afternoon. As I've been introduced, I'm Secretary General Kim Hyun-jung of Gyeonggi Federation for Environmental Movement, and I'm living in Seongnam. It is located southern part of Seoul, south of Seoul. A lot of people are living in Seongnam district, and a lot of consumption activities are happening in the city. So I'm going to talk about climate change and how to protect the biodiversity. I have been carrying out many activities based on that. And the presentation, the theme of presentation is this: Living Lab with our citizens under the theme of resource circulation. And the Living Lab's name is Seongnam Resource Circulation Store RE100. So when it comes to RE100, you may think capital RE and 100, which is about renewable 100%. So also I'm going to talk about that. And I guess it's a parody of that RE100. If RE is written in capital, then it's RE100, which is a global initiative. But our RE100 is not a capital RE. So this RE stands for recycling. As you can see, the store is for resource circulation. So our citizens bringing up recycling products, then those citizens can get word from the local government that their collected products will be 100% recycled in the future. And let me introduce one place. It is Ri 100 located in Taepyeong 4-dong in Seongnam City. There is a gallery called Zero Waste. It is an environmental gallery. As you can see, there is a Valenoptera musculus displayed in this gallery. So waste coming from household, when they are under mismanagement, then the final victim would be the ocean and living organisms in the ocean. So those stories are told by local villagers. So to clean up waste in sea or the ocean, Seongnam resident cannot go to the sea frequently since it's far away. So if we are good at managing waste in the first place, then we can make sure that those wastes are not entering into the sea. So we should do better at the process of management. And the another space is Future Museum. In this museum, you can see some credit cards. You can see a bunch of credit cards in the picture. And some previous speakers said we are every day eating microplastics. So this sentence inspired art-wise many villagers in the city. So this museum is a place where citizens' awareness can be improved. So let me tell you a story regarding Seongnam Resource Circulation Store. This store collects a lot of recyclable collects. So those recyclable wastes are, if you bring up those rinsed and unlabeled products, then you can get incentives from this store. So I guess the store purchases recyclable products from our citizens. So there are some activists working in that store. Usually they are residents in that area. And in the store, you can see a lot of household waste which can be recyclable. Indeed, vinyl and plastic resources are collected in an intensive manner because the biggest theme of regarding environmental issue is plastic. So we need to solve plastic issues locally. Indeed, activities should be practiced at a local level. So if citizens bring up recyclable waste, then they can get incentives. You can see very clean waste, and those wastes are transferred into selection and sorting facilities. So those wastes will be directly transported to recycling companies without going to other selection facilities or sorting facilities. Some wastes are just going to be dumped into the sea or landfill or incinerated, but that is not the case on this store. So based on citizens' trust, engagement of citizens has been enhanced. And in 2019, in the city of Seongnam, as a living lab, Seongnam Resource Circulation Store started. But now we have more than 20 hubs in the city. So disposing recyclable waste is related to our daily lives. So we, Seongnam City, believe that resource circulation store should be escalated as a local level policy. So in every local area in the Seongnam City, resource circulation center stores were installed. As I mentioned before, currently we have 20 stores in the city. It means that social acceptance and engagement have been explosively increased. And currently, the store is under management of resource circulation policy of the Seongnam City. Then, what makes citizens' engagement improved and enhanced? So currently, Seongnam City is operating Re100 stores. So as I mentioned before, if citizens bring up plastics and other waste, or other waste that could worsen climate change and undermine biodiversity, then we can collect, the store can collect and make sure those wastes are recycled 100%. So we weigh those plastics brought up by citizens, and depending on weight, the store give incentive to citizens. So we can easily collect data every month. As I said, at 20 hubs, we collect data, and such collected data is open to the public. So as you can see on the slide, it is last year's data. So for just 1 month, 8.8 tons were collected, and we were able to save 10 tons of CO2 emissions. So with such data, we can encourage people's and citizens' participation. So with such activities, peoples and citizens have become smarter and smarter. They know how to sort waste, and they know what values in it. So as people start becoming smarter, they started asking questions. They started asking a question: what happened to those plastic that we brought up to you? So businesses and Seongnam City worked hard, and they created an economic cycle so that they can show what happened to their plastic waste to the citizens. So with collected PET bottles, we created threads, and some companies created clothes and products with wasted products. And this picture shows what happened to wasted plastics. So each stage shows how much effort was put into by citizens and how much cooperation was carried out by local government and players. So those waste plastics are transformed into products. And the company called AR created products and items. So they asked us, what should we do with these collected plastics? So we asked them to create items for citizens in Seongnam and citizens in Korea. And we asked them to show them that their waste plastic bags, their waste plastics could come back to them as products. And they put a label, and the label says, this product is a eco-friendly product made out of raw materials that comes from recollected PET bottles. So through this, the value of Re100 and the belief of circulation economy was created. So with that, resource circulation store has experienced a lot of engagement of citizens, and we are currently planning to increase more hubs. And the store is located in every dong. And as I mentioned before, we have 20 hubs. And let me tell you a more meaningful story. This resource circulation store and collected waste. So people started thinking about how to bring up those plastic waste so that they can be valuable in the future. So you can see some recycling zone in every single family house or detached house or apartment. And you can see the status and condition of plastic bottles in Seongnam has improved. So selection site and sorting sites of Seongnam, and its performance has increased as well. So if you if you dump waste plastics, then those waste plastics could be recycled. So at the first session, some speakers mentioned that we need local plan for plastic issues, and we need to think about how well the local government can address plastic issues. So local plan and local activity should be benchmarking our case. So I'd like to suggest, why don't you benchmark our story in Jeju as well? So a global issue can be managed locally in a very concise manner, in a very precise manner. So in your area, in Jeju, I hope resource circulation living lab would be a good idea. So why don't you start such living lab with your local residents and islanders for a better future? Thank you very much for your presentation.
So I think I can summarize into 2 points. In 2012, June, the operation performance was explained in detail in her presentation. Also, she talked whether we will be able to successfully operate the system. So to put it very simply, waste plastic into resource activities. So the whole process should start from the collection of waste and the process of the raw materials, raw thread, and the selling of the product, all the way down to the recycling of waste plastic. So that was an exemplary model case in her presentation. Thank you so much for your explanation. So I think let us begin the very final. I'd like to give the final presentation will be made by Danish NGO, and the name of the NGO is Plastic Change. And the Plastic Change has been doing a lot of effort, and CSO of Plastic Change, Anne Aitomaki, will make a presentation. And actually, the CSO in the Plastic Change has been engaging in multiple activities to resolve plastic issues, not to mention the political relations and the communication campaigns relating to plastic issues. So the topic of the presentation is the plastic changes, the activities of the plastic changes. So it will be explained in her presentation.
Hello, and can you hear me?
Yes, good afternoon.
Yeah, okay, then I need to give you some notice before you start your presentation. As I have already informed to every speaker in Korean, I need to remind you again, even though that has been simultaneously interpreted. So the given time for your presentation is 15 minutes, okay? Please keep this in your mind. If you use longer than 15 minutes, I think you can guess what will happen to the next event. Okay?
Of course.
Okay. Then I think after your presentation, we have the panel discussion. We have the 4 panelists. Maybe you can get some questions or comments from on your presentations from the panelists. At that time, you are required to answer on the question or comment. That should be your role in this session. Okay?
Yes.
All right. Are you ready?
Of course.
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah, okay, please go ahead, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to speak at your conference. I have a presentation prepared, and what you're seeing here is the team of Plastic Change, and we're a Danish-based NGO. We're in Copenhagen, Denmark, and this is my small team of 10 people. And next slide, please. And my name is Anna Aitumaki, and I'm the strategic director of the organization. I come from a background in social and cultural anthropology, and hence my background. I look at plastic as more of a design problem and as a cultural problem, where you can say that in many ways plastic has become the symbol of a single-use culture that is growing all around the world. And next slide, please. So Plastic Change, we were founded in 2014 as a result of the growing plastic pollution. For the first years, we were conducting citizen science research expeditions all around the world with various scientists on board, where we were trawling every day for microplastics in the ocean surface. And we were documenting, the visual part of the plastic pollution through films and documentaries and pictures and so forth. And this was to bring the agenda back to Denmark and Europe as a growing environmental problem. And on that journey, we learned that 80% of the plastic that ends up in the oceans, they stem from land-based sources. So as more of almost like a symbolic transition in 2018, we sort of tied up the boat, and then we went to shore to say that we have to stop the plastic pollution at source. And as a symbol of that, we got UN certification in 2018, and we also became, in 2019, a board member of the global movement called Break Free from Plastic that consists of 2,700 organizations all around the world in all continents that work together under one global strategy to mitigate and reduce plastic pollution of the ocean. Next slide, please. So our mission is a world without plastic pollution, and we do this by focusing now solely on the reduction of plastic production and usage. And this is to benefit, obviously, the environment and the climate, but also human health. We have a holistic approach where we work with policy, industry, and civil society. So for the policy, we have national targets. We work on EU level. And with the new UN treaty that is being negotiated, we are also part of that process to pursue a global legislation on plastic. For the industry, we have over the years done different kinds of partnerships. Now we have what we call innovation partnerships. And those are partnerships that we do with only companies that are interested in working on reduction and reuse. So if they come and say, we have a project on recycling, we say, no, thank you. I mean, some other people would do that, but we want to, reduce overall consumption. So an example could be, we had a partnership with the international brewery company, Carlsberg, Tuborg, for festivals, the largest festivals in Denmark, where, and this is just to give an example of this type of partnership, where up until this pilot, it was, customary to have single-use cups at the festivals for the consumption of beverages. But with this, we set up a system where we had designed a washable plastic cup, but that was designed to be washed and collected, so it had a refund. So if it ended up on the ground, somebody else would pick it up and then return it, because then they would get a refund. And that is a way to minimize waste consumption and a smarter use of plastic overall. And then for the civil society, we do campaign awareness, we educate the youth. The picture to the right, it's from one of our animation campaigns. It's called Poseidon, the litter bug. You can find it on YouTube. It was one of our most successful campaigns, and it's been watched over 10 million times, and it's quite funny. So I think also you have to bring in some humor in communicating with civil society. Next slide, please. So our vision is a zero waste society, and in Denmark we have the very unfortunate championship of being the country in Europe that produces the most waste overall per capita. And obviously this is not sustainable, so we have to find a way to reduce that, because we can see the more there's a linear connection between more production leads to more waste, leads to more pollution. So obviously we have to tackle this growing linear way of take, make, and throw away. And to apply a zero waste approach it's also setting a goal, saying that we want to be waste-free in 2050, but it's also then developing a roadmap. What are the actions that we need to take to reach this goal in 2050? Next slide, please. So everything that we do is sort of taps into this systemic change, circular economy, and the green transition, where a lot of the structures that we're surrounded with now, they need to change. Obviously, this will not happen overnight. This is the continuous struggle to say. So within, you could say, legislation, right now there are some barriers in the current legislation because they're based on a very linear way of thinking. So there's something about how can we, pursue and push for more progressive legislation frameworks that supports not just better waste management, but looking at the reduction side of waste generation. And when we talk about redesigned growth models, it's based on industry, as the example I mentioned before. How can industry still be feasible as an industry, but reduce their overall environmental footprint in their production? And then the culture, as I mentioned, I think plastic, especially the single use, has it's become a culture where we can change the single use plastic to a different material. But will we then really have achieved anything? Maybe if it ends up in the ocean, it will be less impactful. But then again, if you look at it from a resource perspective and how we utilize the resources of society and the earth, that's not a sustainable way forward. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is, the linear way of the plastic life cycle right now. And in many ways, plastic right now, it's designed to be a linear material that we're trying to make circular. The faucet on the right, it's an analogy to that we need to turn off the tap. So if you look at the bottom where you have the ocean, obviously we have to turn off the tap on the plastic leaking into the ocean. And the next step before that is the waste management. And also this is also where we have to turn off the tap. So when we in plastic change, we look mostly at looking up on the consumption, on the retail and businesses, on the plastic production and the oil and gas extraction, because this is where you will create the most impact. And when I talked about plastic as a linear material, it's not because we don't want plastic, we just want plastic to be designed differently. And when we talk about design, it's designing plastic as a material because it's a material that is designed. It has a lot of chemicals, and so one thing is you have to look at the design of the material, but then you also have to look at the design of the products. So to go back to the single-use cup again, the single-use plastic cup, it can be replaced with a multi-use plastic cup that is designed to be washed. And the third part of that is we have to look at the design of the system. Just like waste management is a system that is developed to cater for single-use production, we have to build new systems to cater for reusable business models. So this is what we do mostly focus upstream. And this year earlier, there was a new report launched by the OECD that says that in 2060, the plastic waste generation will be tripled. And half of that is estimated to go into landfills, and only 5% will be recycled. So we're looking into a dark future if we don't, find a way to sort of set in between focusing on waste management, but going more upstream and say, how can we design these things differently? Next slide, please. Yeah, and just to emphasize that, that point, this is the visualization of the EU waste hierarchy, and this is, the foundations of how we work, where you could say, right now, today, we have been focusing more on removal and recycling, which doesn't have that high of an impact, whereas in the future, we have to look much more of reduction and reuse. So you could consider this as more of a compass of where we should place most effort. Next slide, please. Yes, and this is the same visualization. And again, the red dotted line is sort of say, like, we don't look below that, we only look above that. And I think now for, as I mentioned, the UN is negotiating a global treaty on plastic, and we have this global movement of the 2,700 organizations that works on, how can we get the most ambitious treaty possible, and it has to be finalized before 2025. And what we globally are pushing for in between all these organizations is how can we look more to the production side, on the production, but also on the consumption, and make sure that this will be part of a global legislation, as well as a high focus on the chemical components that goes into plastic. Because if we want a circular economy on plastic, and I think we do, because in many ways plastic is a superior material. It's just designed in a very, very unfortunate way right now. But then the chemicals in plastic is key. And then looking at this design of the material, design of the product, and then design of the system. So this is what we're going to be focusing a lot on for the coming years. It's like getting some high ambitions into to the global treaty. Thank you all so much. That was my presentation for this afternoon. I hope that was in due time.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to give a good thanks for keeping your time very punctually. Okay. All right. Then, 간단하게 발표.
I think I need to summarize the presentation details. So she talked about the activities of the plastic change and the introduction of the plastic change as well, the time of establishment and the responsibilities and mission and vision of the institution was introduced in her presentation. Also, she talked the approaches to the plastic issues. In a narrow sense, it might be just the plastic issue, but in a broader sense, it could be the waste issue. So those two narrow and broad framework were proposed. And then all the activities had to be redesigned. So that redesigning was empathized, especially for the approaches and the framework we used for the plastic issues. And that kind of restructuring must happen in the plastic issues as well, she said. And all the cultural things has to be changed as well, including our behaviors, and the economic development model should be redefined as well. And the total social system and the transition of the social system has to be realized as well, she said. And economic and social systems and new approaches to those systems were explained. And more specifically, the plastic issue or waste issue, we need to change how we approach to those two issues as well. So she proposed the 4 key elements of such approach, and one is how to remove the already generated waste and the recycling of them and reuse of them and the reduction of the waste generated. Those are 4 components. And as of today, the reduction of the waste generated should be paid, and reused and recycling of the waste plastics, and from collection and the remover, we need to go backward in the reversed manner, she said. This means that the amount of plastic waste generated must be minimized from the beginning, and that reversal structure was proposed in a presentation.
Your presentation in Korean to our audiences. Okay, then 그러면은
Then let us begin the panel discussion session. The panel discussion session will be joined by 4 discussants. And let me introduce the first discussant, who are from Jeju Island. Chung Eun-ok, Secretary General of Jeju Provincial Council for Sustainable Development. Actually, please let me introduce every discussant first. Please say hello to the audience. And the remaining 3 are overseas guests, and you will be able to see their faces on the main screen on the podium, I believe.
Antonio, Eva, Craig.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon. Good morning.
Oh, I got you. All of you are behind me. Okay. All right. Now it's the time for us to start a panel discussion. Then I have some notice before we start the panel discussion. Then the theme of this session is the best practices of conserving biodiversity as a response to plastic pollution. In relation to this theme, you can participate as the panelist in this session. Then I think you have 3 ways. The first one is maybe you have some questions on the presentation by 4 speakers. Then you can deliver your questions. And also, even though that's not a question, however, you have some comments on the presentation, then you can deliver the comments to the speaker. And the third one is in relation to this theme, maybe you have some different idea. Then means the speakers deliver the very, very important key points on the theme of this session. However, based on your academic or practical experience, or the speakers missed or not emphasized this key point, then you can deliver your idea on that. Okay, so when you deliver your questions and comments to the speaker, you are required, before you deliver the questions, you need to say, this question goes to whom? Because the speaker can be ready to answer your questions. If without indicating any speakers, the name of speakers, we have no idea who should answer your comments or questions. Okay? All right, then we start the, 누구, 연욱 씨 먼저 하실래요? Yeah. Okay. The first
So
Jung Yeonok from Korea. Sorry, there. This is the one important thing. Only 5 minutes will be given to you. All right?
안녕하십니까.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Jung Yeon-ok, Secretary General of Jeju Provincial Council for Sustainable Development. We have many panelists, so I wrote down some points. And before I start, I'm going to ask questions to. I'm going to ask a question to Hyung-Mook Lim. So could you please compare the current status of the sea and the status of the sea when you filmed? And next, I'm going to ask a question to Director Kim. Recycling rate of Seongnam City. So what is recycling rate of Seongnam City's recycling rate? So could you please elaborate any other impacts and benefits of comprehensive impacts and benefits of Seongnam Resource Circulation Store? So it may take time if we cover one question at a time. So if you receive a question, then please write down the question on your note, and then after panelists finish their comments, then you can give answers to the question. So this is how we proceed.
I will give my comment in English again. If you have the question or comment, then the speaker will not respond immediately after getting all questions and the comments from all panelists. Then the speaker will respond to your question or comment. Okay? Yeah, go ahead.
네, 저는 오늘 세계 플라스틱 오염과 활동 사례를 접하면서
So I have experienced a lot of best practices in biodiversity conservation and plastic pollution. So we'd like to introduce our campaign called The Miracle of 2 gram. So there are 17 SDGs, and if we classify them into 5 categories, one of the principles is that clean, sanitary, and number 12, wise consumption, and 13, climate change response, and 14th, conservation of land ecosystem and aquatic ecosystem. So when it comes to correlation, 12.5, with recycling and reusing, we should substantially reduce plastic consumption and plastic production. And by 2025, marine litterings and waste from land activities should be prevented, and it should be substantially reduced. And I was able to recall those SDG goals. And plastics are penetrating into our lives, and because of plastics, human beings and nature are under threat, and we need to carry out many projects and campaigns. We need plastics, but convenience delivered by plastics are threatening us, and waste plastics are now becoming resources. And we carried out a campaign called The Miracle of 2 gram, which is about collecting the lid of cap bottles. So we created this campaign and started it, and the cap lid of PET bottle is 2 grams, so that's why we named our project as The Miracle of 2 grams. And we were able to find out that Mongolian students were not able to afford their school uniform, so that's why we started this project to raise funds. And it is a social returning project, and currently 40 institutions are joining and carrying out the same project. And there are many partners, including businesses, civil societies, religious groups, and schools. A lot of people are joining the campaign, collecting lead caps, and the lead caps are collected and they are shifted to sanitary pads and caps and other products as well, and daily life items. And recollected items were not released again. So we recycled and reused collected lids, but we collected a lot of lid of the bottles. So some parts of the lids collected are exported to the mainland of the country. So this lid weighs 2 grams, and with 30 cap bottles, we can create a plastic vest. But we cannot handle all collected bottle caps, so that's why we export it into the mainland of the country. So we need to think about what can we do at the central governmental level. And last year we created this plastic vest, and we plant a tree that absorbs CO2, and we distribute it to Jeju Islanders, and they were really enjoying it. So plastic, we should stop using plastic, which is the best invention of human history. But while preparing for this forum, we need to think globally and we need to act locally. That resonates my mind. So local practices and participation can make a difference in the world. With this, I'd like to conclude my comment. Thank you.
대표님 너무 짧은데.
That was quite a short time allowed for me.
We are moving on to Antonio. Are you ready?
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you for all participants. I will not be extending my comments because we have another session that we can also use for that. But basically what I learned is that we are here playing a game of multiple dimensions, and we live in a very turbulent and complex world that can find solutions adapted to the global approach that we need. Because many of the proposals and solutions and approaches that we saw this morning, they don't fit for a large portion of our planet. So my question is, how can we quickly move towards a more effective way of managing the problems? Because while we are promoting the idea of circular economy in Europe, it makes any sense bringing that to developing countries where they are limited to consume what we produce. So this is from the governance point of view and from the management effectiveness, my main questions. And the final one that I would like to have, and this is general for any presenter, it's what's the role of science and knowledge on this? Because there's a lot of speculation and ideas, and we don't see science evidences and figures about the solutions. We see about the problems, we have measurements, quantities, qualities, and ideas, but we don't have for the solutions scientific evidence enough to support and to help to decide which solution can benefit with our problems. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No question to any 질문이 없고요. We have no time to
No further questions?
your comment again. I will deliver all the summaries when I draw the concluding remark after the discussion from panelists. Okay, then next we are moving on to Eva. Eva?
Yes, good afternoon.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, go
how are
ahead,
you?
please, yeah.
Happy to be here to share this session with some friends and with these great panelists. Yes, I have followed with a lot of interest all these presentations, and some questions that come to my mind are in the line with what has commented Antonio Abreu, how to develop solutions that can be implemented at different scales. So I am really convinced that a systemic change is necessary in order to reverse this situation. So we have to be very clear that we are in a multiple dimensional crisis. and the system change is needed. So I think there is a lot of work to do at the level of public policies, and this has to be in the different competencies levels. But the policy is not enough if we want to really foster this change. I think we have to go to the economic rules of the use of materials and energy, and many of the externalities that this problem is creating have to be in the accountability of the very big corporations that are behind the biggest production of plastic in the world. And Dr. Hong Yon has already commented the graph of the plastic production globally dramatically increasing year after year. Also, Anne has commented this. And it seems to me that democracy is not enough in order to stop this problem, because the regulations are coming into operation in many parts of the world, but still the plastic problem is growing up. So these are some of the points that are coming to my mind after listening to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right, then the final panelist, Dr. Craig.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes, good. Okay. Welcome. I'd like to introduce myself briefly. I'm a long-standing United Nations staff person working on international conventions regarding environment, particularly chemical pollution and waste pollution. And we're starting to see now, a couple of our panelists had mentioned previously about the UN treaty that's about to be negotiated. And I just wanted to add a little bit of information on that, because I think going last is always a privilege and a disadvantage, but I think it's a good opportunity to pull some of this information and comments together from efforts at the international level. UNEP, the UN Environment Program, I'm sure some of you have heard, has a mandate to negotiate a treaty, as Anne mentioned, by the end of 2024. The first negotiation session, which will be open to all UN member states, 193 countries to negotiate, starts in Uruguay in November of this year. So we're getting a little bit of a late start. But when we're talking about the different approaches that need to happen in different countries, what we're going to probably try to negotiate is a convention that one size sort of fits all, that's flexible enough that developing countries, as Antonio mentioned, that don't have much capacity can fit in to what the developed countries that are causing a lot of the problems in the first place need to do to turn off the tap. And right now we're starting to see in some of the intergovernmental pre-negotiations a couple of key things that I just want to summarize quickly here. One is to turn off the tap in terms of new production. There's even talk among some countries to have an outright ban on single-use plastics, a global ban. And then using some other conventions experience that we have, then governments would have to apply for exemptions to those bans. So for instance, there are very compelling medical needs for single-use plastics because of hygienic standards. We've seen this with COVID over the past couple of years as well. So governments would have to apply to say, okay, we'll allow these specific exemptions for either a limited or fairly unlimited period of time. And then second, so getting the production into the circular economy, phasing out single-use plastics that aren't necessary for health or other compelling reasons, and then turning off the tap will help problem. So looking at the plastics pollution that is in the marine environment, the convention already has a mandate that the marine environment is a key focus for the convention, although not the exclusive focus. And there will be assistance from governments and private corporations, we hope, and other donors to start those cleanup efforts within the convention itself. So to have specific deadlines. Someone mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals, that we have a 2025 deadline we won't even have a convention until beginning of 2025 if we're lucky. So probably some of those goals will be extended. So I think what we're seeing here, and again, is to clean up the pollution, turn off the tap, and have an agreement among governments on proper timelines to push technologies and solutions. One last thing, Antonio, you mentioned the footprint. I think it is of some of the solutions as well. Sometimes the solutions for plastics can be worse than the problem itself. And we have a project actually that's proposed for Mongolia, another colleague mentioned Mongolia, where they're looking at the footprint of alternatives to single-use plastics. Mongolia has very few trees, for example, and in many countries we're seeing single-use knives, forks, chopsticks changing over to wood. We see this in Switzerland where I live quite often. But for Mongolia, that is not a solution because there isn't a proper domestic supply necessarily. So we have to look at each country having its own individual solution, and it's got to be funded. And the last point I just want to make before I finish, sorry if I'm going on a little bit, is that the funding is key. We have many international conventions where the World Bank, the Global Environment Facility, and other multilateral mechanisms provide a financial mechanism. And the financial mechanism, it looks like, will probably be the Global Environment Facility. However, on some of our other environmental conventions, the GEF is the financial mechanism and only provides maybe 20% of the funding that is needed on chemicals, cleaning up chemicals or other wastes, etc., in other conventions. So I think this is going to be the deal breaker, is how does all of this get paid for? And this is where we really need to mobilize assistance from private industry, who also have created a lot of the problem to begin with. So I didn't have a specific question for anyone, but I just wanted to try to pull this together and give you a framework overall of where we're going at the global level on this in the next couple of years. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Your comment is, I think, very, very important because your suggestions, I think, most of the sectors which were not covered by the speakers, I think that will be very valuable and significant. Thank you. Okay, now there are just 5 minutes left. 우리 연옥 씨께 질문한 거 우리
Secretary General Jung, could you please give an answer? I asked a question.
Then the speaker will answer.
네, 바다 생태에 대해서
So regarding the trend of the ocean, it's really hard to talk about the trend of the ocean. Indeed, some green algae didn't come to Korea from China, and the temperature of the sea was really low this year, so green algae was found a lot in the sea. So it's hard to say with certainty that how the ocean has changed. So it's hard to say marine litterings is on the rise. It is certain. And reclamation and construction that takes the sea away have been increased. This is my answer to your question. And next, please go ahead. So you asked a question regarding recycling and sorting rate of Seongnam City before the COVID-19. About 60% of plastics were sorted, but ever since the pandemic outbreak, the use of plastics have been exponentially increased, so which led to the decrease of sorting rate to 49%. So which causes a lot of inconveniences to our citizens. So to solve this issue, that's why we started RE100 projects. And last year, Seongnam achieved 72% of selection rate. So with this store, citizens' mindset have been improved, and it indeed worked really well. So it was very effective. So that's why with more citizens we are trying to do this campaign, and we'd like to become more closer to our citizens. But by the way, compared to the last year, our restore, our circulation center collected about 120 tons of plastics. It means that our citizens collected and brought up 120 tons of plastics, and vinyls and small plastic waste should be recycled going forward. So those products are not yet recycled and sorted by any facilities, but we are doing that. So it is very meaningful. Thank you very much for your comment.
남았습니다.
think we have only 3 minutes left, and I think we have listened to many presentations and discussions so far by many discussants and presenters, and based on it, let me draw a conclusion from the session.
To draw a concluding remark on the basis of the contents presented by speakers or by panelists. 이 주제가
The theme of this session is plastic pollution and the conservation of biodiversity and best practices. So
examples, alright. 이제 보면은
So we have listened to the 4 presentation and 4 discussant as well, and I think I can boil everything down onto 2 points. First is the management of plastic waste, and what would be the best activities. And the second point is that to resolve plastic issues, what kind of strategies would be proper. So those 2 questions would be the gist of the session. So regarding the first point, what would be the best activities for plastic issues? So very specific examples were shared by presenters and discussants. So to summarize, I think I can summarize into 4 components. So what kind of activities would be the best? First, the biodiversity in marine ecosystem must be thoroughly analyzed and assessed, and plastic generation and plastic-related status of the core must be diagnosed as well, and the plastic waste and its impact on biodiversity must be fully understood through research activities, and plastic issues should be resolved, and in the process, the approaches must be assessed and the framework need to be developed as well. That would be the summary of the first point. And for the second point, what would be the best strategies to resolve plastic issues? There could be multiple things, and they were shared in the presentation and discussions as well. And I think I can point out just 2 for the second point. The first one is whether it is collection, disposal, or cleaning up. That could be one strategy. And EPR, extended producer responsibility, can be one strategy as well. And to put it simply, these are all related to the efficient and effective treatment. So this could be the technology-based approach. So that would be the first component. And like it was said by the Danish speakers or WF Korea, those can be added to the second point. On top of the technical approach, social system kind of transformation must be there as well. So social system-based approach is the term I'd like to use for the second component of the second point. So technical approach and social system-based approach would be the 2 approach we can employ to tackle the plastic issues, and those were shared in the final session, I believe. So this session 6 now ends here, and I'd like to extend my gratitude to all the presenters, audience, and discussants on behalf of the steering committee. And now I end the session here. Thank you.
네, 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much. Seeking for changes while solving plastic issues. We have been carrying out many efforts, and we have been doing a lot. So once again, please give them a big round of applause. So with this, we'd like to conclude Jeju Plus International Environment Forum 2022, which has been held for the last 2 days. I'd like to sincerely thank all the online and offline participants for your presence. I believe it was a precious environment experience for plastic-free island and society. Thank you. I'm Shin Ji-e signing off. Thank you.